They say some stories are just stories. But what if some of them aren't? What if simply hearing or reading them is enough to bring misfortune, paranoia, or worse? Tonight, we'll be exploring the most dangerous stories ever told, ones that people claim should never be read, watched, or spoken aloud. I need you to listen carefully, not just hear the words, but really listen, because once you know about this, it stays with you. I first read about the Russian sleep experiment years ago, on a forum buried deep in the internet. It wasn't some poorly written creepypasta. It felt real, too real. The story went like this. In the late 1940s, Soviet scientists supposedly conducted an experiment in a secret facility. They took 5 prisoners, men labeled as enemies of the state, and locked them in a chamber. They promised freedom if they could stay awake for 30 days. It sounded impossible, but they had help. A gas, a stimulant so strong that it would keep their minds sharp, keep their bodies functioning, keep them awake, and at first, it worked. For the first few days, the subjects were alert, talking, laughing. The researchers watched through thick glass as the men paced, read books, whispered to themselves. But as time passed, things changed. At 5 days, the conversations turned paranoid. Whispers became frantic arguments, then silence. By the 9th day, the screaming started. And then, on the 10th day, nothing. Not silence. Something worse. A sound no one could explain. The scientists had to make a decision. They had microphones in the chamber, but they couldn't see inside anymore. The small, reinforced windows had been smeared over from the inside with something. At the 15th day, they shut off the gas. The chamber fell into complete silence. They had expected begging, pleading, maybe even relief. Instead, a voice, flat, emotionless, spoke through the microphone. "We no longer want to be free." The scientists hesitated. Then, finally, they opened the chamber, and that's when they saw what was inside. It wasn't 5 men anymore. Not really. Skin hung loose from their bodies. Chunks of flesh had been torn away, not by knives, but by fingernails. They had done it to themselves. Their fingers were raw, bone peeking through where nails had broken off. They didn't react to the light flooding in. Didn't flinch when soldiers entered with weapons drawn. They just looked, wide-eyed, unblinking, and they smiled. One of them, still standing despite the damage to his body, whispered something before collapsing. No one ever repeated what he said. That's where the official story ends. Some say the surviving subjects were executed on the spot. Others claim the Soviet government continued the experiment, perfecting the gas for use in psychological warfare. But here's the thing. This isn't just some old legend. People who read about it have reported strange things. Insomnia, paranoia, hallucinations. Some say they see shadowy figures in the corners of their rooms at night. Some hear whispers when they're alone. And some, the unlucky ones, wake up gasping for air, feeling like someone is in the room with them, watching, waiting. I don't know if the Russian sleep experiment was real, but I do know one thing. Since the day I read about it, I haven't slept right since. Hollywood has its fair share of urban legends. Some are nothing more than ghost stories told on studio lots. Others are whispered among actors, directors, and producers. Things people won't say out loud, but believe in anyway. Then there's The Curse of Atuk, a script that never made it to the big screen, a movie that was never filmed, and yet people died because of it. This isn't just a ghost story, it's real. And once you know about it, you'll start wondering, was it just coincidence or something more? The story of Atuk started as something innocent, a comedy based on the 1963 novel, the incomparable Atuk. It followed an Inuit man who moves from his isolated home in Alaska to the chaos of New York City. A classic fish-out-of-water story. Producers thought it had potential. Big-name comedians were considered for the lead role, but one by one, those actors died. Not in random accidents. Not decades apart. Every single one of them died, unexpectedly, after agreeing to take the role. The first victim was John Belushi, a comedy legend. One of the biggest stars to ever come out of Saturday Night Live. When Belushi read the script for Atuk, he was interested. Talks began. It could have been his next big hit, but before the film could move forward, Belushi was found dead in his hotel room. Cause of death: a drug overdose. People assumed it was just another case of Hollywood excess. But after what happened next, people started talking. After Belushi's death, the project was shelved for a while. Then, in the late 1980s, another wild comedian was offered the role. Sam Kinison. Kinison had a reputation. Loud, unfiltered, larger than life. He wasn't just interested in Atuk. He actually started filming, and then suddenly he wanted out. Reports say Kinison clashed with the producers. He felt like something was wrong with the script. He demanded rewrites, delays. The project stalled again. Then, in 1992, Kinison was killed in a car accident. His sports car was hit head-on by a drunk driver. Witnesses say he didn't die immediately, that as he lay there, barely conscious, he started talking to someone who wasn't there. Some say he whispered, "I don't want to go." Then he went silent. In the early 1990s, another comedy legend got the script. John Candy. By all accounts, Candy was loved by everyone in Hollywood. A kind man, a family man, not the type to have enemies. He read Atuk and was considering the role. Before he could sign on officially, Candy suffered a massive heart attack. Another sudden, tragic death. By this point, the whispers had started. People who had worked on the film before, agents, producers, even assistants, wanted nothing to do with it. But Hollywood doesn't let things die. Not even cursed things. Then came Chris Farley. Like Belushi before him, Farley was a rising star in comedy. Big, loud, unstoppable. He idolized Belushi. He wanted the same kind of career, the same kind of fame, and he got it. Right down to the tragic end. Farley was approached for Atuk. He was excited. He wanted it to be his movie. He told friends about it. He had even started quoting lines from the script. Then, in 1997, Chris Farley was found dead in his apartment. A drug overdose, just like Belushi. This is where it gets even stranger. After Farley's death, people in Hollywood were terrified of Atuk. But someone else searched for a role. Not the lead, but a supporting part. That person was Phil Hartman. And in 1998, Hartman was murdered by his wife in their home. It was sudden, brutal, a tragedy no one saw coming, and yet it fit the pattern, because everyone attached to Atuk seemed to die violently, unexpectedly, or under disturbing circumstances. After Hartman's death, the script was locked away. No one wanted to touch it. No one wanted to be the next victim. The deaths had followed the same pattern. All comedians, all men with big personalities, all either reading the script or officially signing on, and all of them dead too soon. People still debate whether it was just coincidence, Hollywood excess catching up to its biggest stars, or something else, something lurking in the pages of a film that was never meant to be made. Because here's the thing, movies are just stories. Scripts are just words, but sometimes words have power. And Atuk, it's a story that was never meant to be told. I need you to understand something before I start this. If you ever find the road, don't drive it. I know how that sounds. Another urban legend, another stupid internet story meant to scare you. But this isn't just a story. This is a warning, because I drove the 11-mile road, and I wish to God I hadn't. I first heard about it years ago. A road that could grant you your greatest wish, if you had the nerve to endure its 11 miles. Simple rules. You had to drive alone. You couldn't stop. No turning back. No opening the doors or windows. No matter what you saw or heard, you had to keep going. People claim that strange things happened along the way. Hallucinations, voices, figures in the dark. Some, they felt pain. Real, physical pain. Most never made it to the end. And the ones who did, nobody knows. They got their wish. Maybe. Or maybe something else happened to them. Something worse. I didn't believe it. Not at first. But there was something in my life I wanted more than anything. Something I would do anything for. So I searched. And one night, just after 2 a.m., I found it. A nameless, cracked road at the edge of town, surrounded by nothing but trees. My headlights barely cut through the darkness. The asphalt looked ancient, like it had been abandoned for years. I felt it then, a pressure in the air. A stillness that wasn't natural, but I told myself it was just nerves. And I started driving. The first mile was easy. Just a road, empty and lifeless. My radio buzzed with static, but I ignored it. Then, at mile 2, I noticed something. The trees on either side of the road weren't moving. No wind. No sound. Like a frozen photograph. At mile 3, the temperature dropped. I could see my breath in the air. My hands stiffened on the wheel. But I kept going. At mile 4, the voices started. They weren't whispers. They weren't distant. They were inside my car. Soft, murmuring voices, just behind my seat. I could hear them breathing. A sick, wet sound, like lungs full of water. I forced myself to keep my eyes on the road. Don't look. Don't stop. I pressed the gas pedal, and the voices laughed. The air was freezing now. The windshield fogged up despite the heat blasting from the vents. And then, I saw it. A shape standing in the middle of the road. Tall. Thin. Motionless. No details, just a black silhouette. Like something cut out of the world itself. I gripped the wheel, heart hammering. Just drive through it, I told myself. It's not real. The moment my car should have hit it. It was inside. Something brushed against my neck. Fingers, cold and dry. My stomach twisted as I felt it breathing against my ear. I didn't scream. I didn't stop. I kept driving. At mile 6, my stomach clenched like something inside me was twisting, pulling. The pain came in waves. Sharp, stabbing. Then deep, like my organs were being rearranged. I gasped for air, gripping the wheel so tight my knuckles cracked. The headlights flickered. The road twisted, narrowing, shrinking. I kept my foot on the gas. Faster, faster. They were watching me now. Figures lined the road on either side, just beyond the tree line. Tall, unmoving shapes. Dozens, hundreds of them. I didn't look at their faces. I couldn't, 'cause I knew if I did I wouldn't make it to mile 8. The first drop hit the glass. Then another, and another. A slow, steady drizzle of red, streaking down in thick lines. I turned on the wipers. The blood smeared, and the figure stepped closer. The road narrowed. I couldn't breathe. The car jerked. Something had grabbed my back tire. I slammed the gas. The engine screamed. The car lurched forward. The grip broke. But I knew something was climbing onto the car. The seat beside me sank. The weight of something heavy. I kept my eyes straight ahead. Don't look. Don't look. But I could see it. Out of the corner of my eye, a face that wasn't a face. just a hole. A gaping, wet, twitching. It leaned closer. I gritted my teeth so hard they cracked. Faster. Just 1 more mile. It came from everywhere. The road, the trees, the air inside the car. Agonized. Animal screams. A sound that made my bones vibrate, made my skin crawl. I couldn't take it. My vision blurred. My arms felt wrong, like something was inside me, controlling me. I wanted to stop, just for a second, but I knew if I did, I'd never leave this road. So I kept driving. The last mile was nothing. Just black. Not darkness. Nothing. Like the world had vanished. The road was gone. The trees. The figures. The voice gone. I was floating. Weightless. A voice, not mine, spoke inside my head. What is your wish? I opened my mouth, and I answered. I don't remember making it home. I woke up in my driveway, engine still running, headlights cutting through the early morning fog. I felt empty, like something had been taken from me, or given to me. I got my wish. But now, every night, when I close my eyes, I see the 11-mile road, and I know it's waiting for me to drive it again. I don't know why I did it. Maybe it was boredom, maybe it was curiosity, maybe it was something that wanted me to. I've always been fascinated by urban legends, the ones that seem almost believable, the ones with just enough detail to make you wonder if someone, somewhere, actually went through it. But I never thought I'd become a part of one. I found the Man in the Fields ritual one night on a dark web forum, the kind of place where people share experiences that don't sound entirely fake. There were warnings, pages and pages of them, people saying not to try it, that once you start, there's no going back, that if you fail, he follows you forever. I should have listened. The ritual was simple, or so I thought. Step 1. Start just after sunset. Step 2. Walk into your backyard and whisper, "The fields are ready for harvest." Step 3. Return inside and check every room in your house for an open door or window. If you find one, close it. Do this before midnight. Step 4. If you succeed, you are safe. If you fail, he is invited in, and once he's inside, he never leaves. It was stupid. A dumb internet challenge. I lived alone in a small house in the countryside. No neighbors, no distractions. If I was going to test an urban legend, this was the perfect place. The sky was a deep purple when I stepped outside. A cold wind pressed against my back as I whispered the words, "The fields are ready for harvest." I don't know what I expected. Thunder? A shadow in the trees? Some deep, inhuman voice answering me. Nothing happened. I went back inside, locking the door behind me. My house wasn't big, just a single story with a few rooms. I checked the kitchen, the bathroom, the bedroom. Every window was shut, every door closed. By 11:30 p.m., I was done. Easy. Too easy. I sat down in the living room, waiting for midnight to pass. That was it. I had won. And then a sound, a slow, creaking sound from my bedroom. I felt something tighten in my chest. I knew I had closed everything. My legs felt stiff as I stood up, my ears straining against the silence. I walked down the hall, each step heavier than the last. The door was open, just slightly, a few inches, not wide enough for someone to slip through, but just enough to be wrong. I reached for the doorknob and froze. There was a smell, not rot, not sulfur, something worse, like damp earth mixed with old wet straw, a thick, choking scent that filled my nose, making my stomach turn. I forced the door shut. Locked it. It was past 11:45. Just 15 minutes left. But I felt it now. The weight of something watching. Inside, I walked back to the living room, trying to stay calm. I told myself I was imagining things, that I had missed a door, that I had made a mistake. And then I saw it, a shape, at the end of the hallway. Tall, motionless. The dim light barely touched it, but I could see enough. Long, twisted limbs. A head tilted too far to the side, like it was studying me. A figure made of shadow, of earth, of something ancient. I couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. The clock on the wall ticked. 11:56 p.m. 4 minutes. The thing didn't move, didn't breathe, but I knew it was waiting. I took a slow step back. Another. It didn't follow. 11:57 p.m. I could hear my heartbeat in my ears. My skin felt cold, tight. I reached the front door, hand shaking as I touched the lock. Don't run. I didn't know where the thought came from, but I listened. I stayed still. 11:58 p.m. The shadow twitched. A slight shift, almost like a breath. I clenched my teeth. 11:59 p.m. 1 minute. Just 1 minute. A low sound filled the room. A rustling, like wind through dry stalks of corn. I gripped the door handle, knuckles white. Midnight. The sound stopped. When I looked up, the shadow was gone. I stood there for a long time, my breath coming in sharp gasps. My skin was covered in sweat. My legs ached from standing so still. I didn't sleep that night, or the night after. It's been months. Maybe longer. I don't keep track anymore. I won. I finished the ritual. I should be safe. But sometimes, late at night, I hear it, the rustling, a whisper of wind in my bedroom where no windows are open. The scent of damp earth when I wake up, choking the air. And sometimes, just before I turn off the lights, I see him standing at the edge of the room, waiting, watching, and I know I didn't win. There are songs that get stuck in your head, catchy tunes, old melodies, things you hum without thinking. Then there are songs that get stuck somewhere deeper, songs you hear once and never forget, songs that feel like they were meant for you, like they know you. And then there's Gloomy Sunday, the song that makes people die. It was written in 1933 by a Hungarian composer named Rezu Sirus, a simple piano piece. Haunting. Slow. A song about heartbreak. About loss. A song about wanting to die. When it was released, people started noticing something strange. Wherever it played, suicides followed. Newspapers in Budapest reported cases of people jumping from bridges, drinking poison, hanging themselves, all after listening to the song. Some were found clutching the sheet music in their hands. It got worse when the song spread to other countries. In England, a woman was found dead in her apartment, her record player still spinning with the song on repeat. In America, a young man shot himself in the head after playing the song on the piano. By the late 1930s, radio stations banned it. Not because of superstition, because they were afraid. Cyrus, the man who wrote Gloomy Sunday, should have been proud of his success. Instead, he was cursed by it. The song had made him famous, but it had also ruined him. He fell into deep depression. He lost the woman he loved. He couldn't escape the dark reputation of his own music. Then, in 1968, he jumped from his apartment window. He survived the fall, only to die later in the hospital. And the worst part, they say his last request was to hear the song one more time. Some people say the song is just too sad, that it speaks to the kind of sorrow people try to hide, that it doesn't curse you, It just makes you face the darkness you were already carrying. But others, they say it's something more, that the melody itself has a pattern, a hidden frequency that gets inside your head. That once you hear it, it doesn't just make you sad, it makes you want to die. Some even say that if you listen to the original recording, something changes. That, for a few seconds. If you're really paying attention, you hear something else beneath the music. Not an instrument, not a voice. Something else. Something that doesn't belong. Most versions of Gloomy Sunday today are altered, changed just enough to be safe. But if you ever come across the original, the one recorded in the 1930s, don't listen to it, because some songs don't just play. Some songs listen back. There are some books you should never open. I don't mean the ones with disturbing stories or gruesome history. I mean the kind of books that feel wrong. The ones that make your skin crawl when you touch them, that seem to hum with something old and heavy. The Book of Soyga is one of those books, and I wish to God I had never read it. I first heard about it in a late-night internet rabbit hole. The story of a book so mysterious that even John Dee, the famed advisor to Queen Elizabeth I, couldn't understand it. Dee was one of the greatest scholars of his time, obsessed with alchemy, astrology, and hidden knowledge. He found references to the Book of Soyga in his studies, and became convinced it held the secrets of the universe. The problem? No one could read it. The book contained pages of strange symbols, charts, and what looked like coded messages. Even Dee, with all his intellect, couldn't decipher it. And when he finally asked a spirit about it, because yes, he allegedly tried that, the answer was chilling. The book could only be decoded by those ready to understand it. The implication? If you weren't meant to read it, you shouldn't even try. And if you did, something would know. For centuries, the book was lost. Some thought it was destroyed. Others believed it was hidden. Then, in 1994, 2 copies surfaced, one in the British Library. That's where I saw it. I had been researching forbidden texts for my thesis. Nothing occult, just history. And yet, when I came across a reference to the Book of Soyga, something drew me in. I didn't believe in curses. Or at least, I told myself I didn't. But when I finally saw the book, when I touched its leather cover, when I turned its pages, I felt it. A deep, unsettling pull, like the book was looking back at me. Most of the book was dense, filled with Latin text I barely understood. But then I reached the tables, pages upon pages of grid-like charts, filled with letters that made no sense. At first I thought it was just some obscure medieval cipher, but the longer I looked, the more my eyes ached. The letters seemed to shift, almost imperceptibly. My vision blurred, and then I heard something. Not a voice, not a sound, a presence, like something pressing against the edges of my mind, waiting for me to understand. That night, I dreamed of the book. I saw the letters rearranging themselves, forming words I couldn't understand. And when I woke up, the words were still there. Not in the book. In my head. They repeated over and over, like a whisper just out of reach. I tried to shake it off. Just a trick of the mind. A leftover impression from hours of staring at cryptic text. But then the scratches appeared. Not on my skin. On my notebook. Thin, jagged marks dug into the paper, like someone had dragged a needle across the page. I hadn't written them. I hadn't even touched the notebook since reading the book. And yet, the marks were there. They formed symbols, ones I had seen in the Book of Soyga. I stopped sleeping. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the pages, symbols flashing behind my eyelids. The whispering grew louder. The presence, whatever it was, felt closer. I started losing time. 1 minute, I'd be making coffee. The next, I'd be sitting at my desk, pen in hand, writing symbols I didn't recognize. I stopped researching. I stopped leaving my apartment. I stopped everything, but it didn't stop me. The last thing I remember before blacking out was the feeling of something watching me. Not from the shadows, from inside my own head. I don't remember what happened next, but when I woke up, the notebook was gone. I tore my apartment apart looking for it, but it had vanished, like it had never existed. The whispering stopped after that. The presence faded. I don't know if I passed whatever test the book was giving me, or if it just moved on. But I know one thing, some books should never be read. And if you ever come across the Book of Soyga, don't turn the pages. So, was it all just coincidence? Or is there something to these stories that goes beyond fiction? If you feel like something is watching you tonight, maybe, just maybe, you shouldn't have listened after all.